This is looking really good.
I think just a little more here. Perfect.
It was a long time ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was telling her, if you feel something, just let it come out, you know?
I think it's important for everyone to find their passion and pursue it with all their heart.
I think it's important to consider all the options before making a decision.
I agree. We should weigh the pros and cons carefully.
My life has been dedicated to this craft, learning from my elders, honing my skills.
I really feel like this new project is going to be a success.
Yeah, I agree. The initial feedback has been very positive.
Yeah, it's amazing how much produce we get from this area.
I know, it's incredible. The soil here must be really fertile.
We came to this island looking for answers, but all we found are more questions.
The night pressed heavily against the windows, as though even the darkness outside conspired to smother the fragile hope inside his chest. He sat alone in the small living room, his hands restless, twisting together as though they might strangle the unease that refused to loosen its grip. The thought of the DNA test result gnawed at him with invisible teeth, each minute dragging like a blade across his patience. He could not sleep, could not eat. His very breath seemed to carry the metallic taste of dread. Why had his mother spoken with such certainty? Why had the man she called his father turned away with such cold denial? The questions swarmed, sharp as hornets, stinging every corner of his mind. He leaned forward, his elbows digging into his knees, his face buried in trembling hands. Memories tried to comfort him, but only sharpened his sorrow. He thought of childhood, of the times he had looked at the man from afar, searching for resemblance, for any reflection of himself in those eyes, those features. But each time the gaze had met his, it had turned quickly aside, leaving him with emptiness colder than rejection. Now science was meant to provide what love had not, an answer carved into strands of blood and bone. Yet even science felt like a cruel judge, holding the verdict behind locked doors. The air in the room felt alive, charged with his heartbeat, whispering his fears back at him. The walls leaned closer, suffocating, and the silence grew louder, mocking him with echoes of uncertainty. He rose suddenly, pacing the room like a trapped animal, his footsteps quick, uneven. The floor creaked under the weight of his turmoil, as though even the wood beneath him groaned with his doubt. He longed for clarity, for someone to take the burden from his shoulders. But all he had was the ache of waiting, the cruel ticking of a clock that seemed to move only when he wasn't watching. At times, anger flared within him, fierce and hot. How dare the man refuse him so easily, dismiss him like a stranger begging for scraps? If blood tied them, how could pride be stronger than truth? He clenched his fists until his nails bit into his palms, the pain sharp but grounding. And then, as quickly as it came, the anger dissolved into despair. Perhaps the man's denial was proof. Perhaps his mother's insistence was nothing more than a desperate illusion. Perhaps he was doomed to wander between truths, belonging to neither side, claimed by no one. He sank back into the chair, his body weary though his mind would not rest. The ceiling above seemed to sag, its shadows stretching long and heavy. He imagined them as the weight of all the unspoken words between him and the man who might be his father. Words unsaid were heavier than words spoken, and they crushed him now, leaving him gasping for meaning. He whispered into the still air, a question too frail to carry far. Who am I, really? The silence offered no reply. The phone on the table glowed faintly with unread messages, but he ignored them. Friends would not understand. Even sympathy felt like an intrusion. This pain was too private, too intimate to share. It was not just about DNA, it was about identity, about the longing to know where his roots dug into the earth. Without that knowledge, he felt adrift, a leaf torn from the tree, tossed on winds he could not control. Each hour without an answer was another mile further from home. He thought of his mother then, her voice unwavering when she told him the man was his father. The conviction in her tone had struck him, but also unsettled him. Could love blind her to truth? Or did she know something he could not yet see? He wanted to believe her, wanted to rest in the warmth of her certainty, but doubt had already dug its claws too deep. It whispered that even mothers could be wrong, that even love could distort reality into what it wished to be. The chair beneath him creaked as he shifted, pulling his knees to his chest like a child seeking shelter. His breath fogged the cool air, and in that fragile mist, he imagined his fears given form. He saw himself as a boy again, standing at the threshold of two worlds, one where he belonged and one where he was forever an outsider. Each step forward only deepened the rift. Each glance backward reminded him of all he stood to lose. The house groaned in the stillness, as though it too shared his unrest. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a hammer striking the fragile glass of his composure. He covered his ears, but the sound lived inside him, beating in rhythm with his frantic pulse. He wanted to scream, to break the silence with noise fierce enough to drown his thoughts, but his throat locked tight, imprisoning the words. Outside, the wind rose, brushing against the windows like fingers scratching for entry. It carried the smell of rain, sharp and metallic, a scent that clung to memory. He remembered storms of his childhood, remembered how he had always wanted someone to hold him steady through the thunder. That longing had never left, and tonight it returned with vengeance, a hunger for safety that no roof could satisfy. In the quiet chaos of his mind, he replayed every interaction with the man. The short words, the distant nods, the deliberate avoidance. Was denial hidden in those gestures, or guilt? He dissected each memory until they lost shape, until they dissolved into shadows that only mocked him further. He pressed his palms to his eyes, trying to hold back tears, but the weight of uncertainty was heavier than pride. He told himself he should be strong, that answers would come soon, that he must endure. Yet endurance felt like drowning, and he was already sinking. He longed for something, anything to break the suffocating stillness. He wanted his mother's voice, her touch, her reassurance, though part of him feared what she might say. Would she repeat her certainty, or would she waver at last? Would her eyes betray doubt? The thought chilled him. He lay back, staring at the cracked ceiling, and let exhaustion pull at his limbs. But sleep refused him, cruel as ever. His mind was a battlefield where hope and despair clashed without mercy, leaving no victor. Every breath was a negotiation, every heartbeat a reminder that time moved forward while answers lagged behind. By the time the key rattled in the door, signaling his mother's return, his body was tense, his mind frayed. He sat upright, startled, his heart pounding. The moment of confrontation had come. Relief warred with fear inside him. He did not know what he would say, only that he could no longer keep the storm inside. His eyes fixed on the doorway, waiting for her figure to appear, carrying with it the possibility of solace or of deeper sorrow. The door creaked open, and with it came the faint rustle of footsteps and the familiar scent of her presence, warm and earthy, like the comfort of old blankets. His mother stepped inside, her face lined with years of labor and love, her eyes sharp yet gentle, always reading him with a precision that words could not rival. She paused when she saw him, sitting rigid on the chair, his expression clouded. Something in her chest tightened. She did not need to ask what troubled him. She already knew. Still, her voice reached out softly, brushing the silence away. "Why do you look so heavy, my son?" He lifted his gaze, reluctant at first, but her eyes caught his and held them steady. In that moment, the dam inside him cracked. He spoke with a voice weighed down by both anger and grief, confessing his fear of the DNA test, his confusion at her certainty, his wound from the man's refusal. Each word trembled with the ache of a boy lost between truths, desperate for a place to stand. She listened without interruption, her hands folded in her lap, her body still as a mountain. When he finished, silence lingered, heavy and raw. Then she reached across the table, her fingers gnarled yet steady, and placed them over his. "Listen to me," she said, her tone firm as stone, yet tender. "That man is your father. Blood does not lie. He may refuse you now, he may hide behind pride, but the truth is carved into you, into him. I know it as surely as I know my own breath." Her words fell like anchors into the storm of his mind, steadying him, even as doubt still hissed at the edges. He wanted to believe her, to drink in her certainty like water in a desert. But the shadows of denial clung too tightly, and his face betrayed his despair. She saw it, and something in her heart broke, not at his doubt, but at his pain. She leaned closer, her voice softening. "Do not let sorrow eat you alive. You are not alone in this. You are my son, and no test can take that from you." Her words were not scientific proof, but they were lifelines, threads of faith she hoped he would grasp. But even as she spoke, she saw the cloud in his eyes remained, stubborn and unyielding. His shoulders sagged, his lips barely moved. He was still drowning, and words alone could not pull him to shore. A thought stirred in her, sudden and daring. If sorrow would not release him, then perhaps laughter could. She rose from her chair, surprising him, and without explanation began to hum a tune. Her voice was cracked with age, but brightened by mischief. She spun lightly in the small space, her feet shuffling in clumsy rhythm. At first he only stared, bewildered. Was his mother truly dancing before him, her arms swinging, her voice warbling through a melody that seemed half forgotten? The absurdity of it clashed against the heaviness of his mood, tugging at the corners of his lips, though he fought to keep them straight. She twirled once, nearly stumbling, and laughed at herself, the sound rich and contagious. Something inside him shifted, a flicker of warmth piercing the gloom. Still, she was not finished. She paused, then reached for a jar of ash from the stove, dabbing her cheeks and forehead until her face looked smeared and comical, a parody of seriousness. She widened her eyes, crossing them, puffing her cheeks, then struck a ridiculous pose. The room erupted not with silence, but with gasps of laughter. First from him, then from the woman who had just stepped into the doorway, watching in astonishment. His laughter broke free like water breaching a dam, rough at first, then flowing uncontrollably. The sound filled the house, echoing against the weary walls, transforming them into witnesses of joy they had not heard in too long. His mother laughed too, wiping her face but refusing to stop the antics. She wagged her finger as if scolding, but her eyes twinkled with delight. He clutched his stomach, tears in his eyes. Not from sorrow this time, but from laughter so deep it shook the dust off his spirit. When at last they calmed, breathless and smiling, she lowered herself beside him. Her face still bore streaks of ash, her hair mussed from her wild dance, but her eyes shone with triumph. "Do you see?" she whispered, brushing his arm gently. "Sorrow cannot chain you when you choose to laugh. I would make a fool of myself 1,000 times if it meant seeing that smile again." Her voice trembled with both humor and love, the confession of a mother who would endure any humiliation to ease her child's burden. He turned to her then, his chest still heaving, and saw not just his mother, but his shield, his anchor, the one who would stand against despair with nothing but love and stubborn joy. Gratitude welled in him, stronger than words. He placed his hand over hers, squeezing tight, his eyes speaking what his lips could not. For a moment there was peace, a fragile, precious peace carved from chaos. The other woman, still smiling, stepped further in, shaking her head in disbelief at the spectacle. She teased gently, calling the mother a performer, praising her courage to play the fool for her son. The room warmed with shared laughter, the air lighter than it had been in weeks. The heaviness of DNA and denial did not vanish, but it loosened its hold, replaced by the reminder that family was not only about blood, it was about the courage to fight sorrow together. The mother rose then, dusting off her clothes, her voice brisk yet playful. Enough tears, enough gloom. Let us cook. Let us make the kitchen smell of life again. She led them both into the kitchen, her steps purposeful, her heart lightened. Pots clanged, fire crackled, ingredients scattered across the counter. The act of cooking was more than sustenance. It was a ritual of togetherness, a declaration that despite unanswered questions, they were still a family. The kitchen glowed with the golden hum of firelight, the scent of garlic and rice rising like incense into the night air. He stood beside his mother, knife in hand, chopping vegetables with a steadiness that surprised him. Each slice was a small act of grounding, each movement a way to tether himself to the present rather than the storm of thought still swirling in his chest. His mother worked beside him, her sleeves rolled up, her face still streaked faintly with the remnants of her comedic disguise. Though the ash had faded, its memory lingered in their shared smiles. For the first time in days, the silence between them was not heavy. It was companionable, the kind that held warmth rather than dread. As pots simmered and steam hissed, the other woman moved gracefully through the small kitchen, fetching bowls, stirring broth, her laughter mingling with the mother's hum. The room became alive, not with grandeur, but with something far rarer, harmony. He watched them both and felt something loosen inside him, like a knot untangling slowly. Perhaps answers would come tomorrow, perhaps pain would return, but tonight was a fragile sanctuary, and he wanted to hold on to it. They gathered at the table when the food was ready, dishes spread before them like offerings. Simple rice, stir-fried greens, broth rich with herbs. It was nothing lavish, yet to him it tasted like abundance. He sat across from his mother, the flicker of candlelight softening the lines of her face. She watched him closely, but not with worry now. Her eyes carried quiet triumph, as though she had wrestled his sorrow into submission and offered him back his laughter. He picked up his chopsticks, and for the first time that day, he ate with appetite. Every bite felt like a prayer answered, every sip of broth a balm. The mother filled his bowl again and again, her gestures tender, insistent. "Eat more," she urged softly. "Strength comes from small things." He nodded, swallowing not only the food but the care laced within it. He realized then that her love was not confined to words or reassurances. It was built into every act, every sacrifice, every spoonful placed before him. As they ate, conversation grew, tentative at first, then flowing more freely. They spoke of ordinary things, the price of food in the market, the weather's stubborn rain, the chickens in the yard. It was banal, yet precious. Each word was a thread, weaving a net strong enough to hold them above despair. He listened, contributed, even laughed, his voice lighter now, no longer chained by sorrow. The DNA test still loomed in his mind, but it no longer strangled him. The weight had shifted, shared among those at the table. His mother's eyes shone each time he laughed, her heart swelling with a relief so profound it nearly brought her to tears. To see her son smile again was to feel the world tilt back toward balance. She reached across the table, squeezing his hand briefly, and whispered, "That is all I wanted, to see you laugh." Her words, simple yet powerful, anchored him in a way no test result ever could. He squeezed her hand back, his eyes glistening with gratitude. The other woman teased them gently, remarking on how the house seemed brighter now, as though the very walls had joined in their laughter. They all turned to look at the flickering candlelight, and indeed the shadows danced with unusual liveliness, chasing gloom from every corner. For a moment, it felt as though sorrow had been banished entirely, replaced by warmth that seeped into their bones. When the dishes were nearly empty, he leaned back in his chair, his stomach full and his spirit steadier. He realized that family was not just about proof or denial, not even about blood. It was about these moments, the clatter of chopsticks, the laughter that bubbled unexpectedly, the comfort of knowing someone would make a fool of themselves just to see you smile. These things mattered more than any document, more than any verdict sealed in an envelope. The mother, still playful, lifted her chopsticks like a conductor's baton and hummed again, urging them to join. They chuckled, following her lead, their voices rising in an awkward, joyous chorus that filled the room. It was not music anyone else would admire, but it was theirs, stitched from resilience and affection. As they sang, the heaviness in his chest melted further, replaced by a warmth that spread like fire through his veins. Later, when the table was cleared and the kitchen washed in the soft hush of evening, he sat quietly with his mother by the doorway. The night air was cool, stars pricking the dark sky above. She leaned her head against the frame, humming faintly, while he stared at the heavens. "I don't know what the test will say," he murmured at last. She turned to him, her face serene. "Whatever it says, you are still my son, and nothing can change that." Her certainty was not thunderous, but it was unshakable, and he let it wrap around him like a blanket. He nodded, the corners of his lips curving into the faintest smile. He understood then that even if the world denied him, even if papers and strangers claimed he did not belong, he would always have her, and that was enough. Blood might define lineage, but love defined family, and hers was a love that no denial could erase. The night deepened, the stars steady above, and he felt peace settle inside him at last. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. Laughter had carried him through sorrow, and his mother's devotion had built him a refuge stronger than stone. Whatever tomorrow brought, he knew he could endure, because tonight had reminded him of something more powerful than DNA, of love that chose, of family that refused to break. And with that truth, he finally allowed himself to rest.